let's go ahead and get into the show, gentlemen. Just recently, the 2021 Hall of Fame inductee class was announced. So I'd like to hear some of your thoughts on that. Ben, if you want to start for me.
Yeah, so just this week, as Mitch said, the finalists for the 2021 class were announced. They're going to include Rick Adelman, who was a longtime coach in the NBA, won a lot of games. Chris Bosh, who retired relatively recently. Michael Cooper from the 80s Lakers. Paul Pierce, who, of course, has had a pretty recent career in media career as well. Bill Russell is a coach this time for his 2 years as a player coach. Jay Wright from Villanova, Yolanda Griffith from the WNBA, as well as Lauren Jackson from WNBA, and WNBA coach Marion Stanley. So there's also a few other finalists that are considered again this year that have been previously considered, which include Tim Hardaway from the 90s, big Miami Heat guy, Marquez Johnson, and then Ben Wallace and Chris Webber. So we have a lot of people there in consideration, and this comes after, last year, the Hall of Fame class that was selected, but didn't get to have their official induction ceremony, which was loaded with Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, and Kobe Bryant, as well as WNBA star Tamika Catchings. So it's going to be a big year. A lot of guys that we grew up watching may be inducted or about to be inducted. So this is a chance for us to talk a little bit about the Hall of Fame.
So I'm looking at this finalist class, and I think it's easier than some people give it credit for to decide if they're Hall of Fame worthy or not. I mean, I'm just going to pose it to you guys. Yes or no? Let's go through it. Chris Bosh, Hall of Fame, yes or no?
Yes.
To me, it's a yes. Pretty easy.
Yeah, I think so.
Paul Pierce, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Pretty easy.
Yeah, I think it's fair.
Michael Cooper? No. I don't think a guy who was a role – just because you're on a great team – you just don't just get in because of that. I mean, he was a great defender. Okay, C-Web. To me, unanimous. Yes, yeah. He's a great player. Tim Hardaway. I think today's metrics hurt Tim Hardaway.
Yeah.
I do think he's one of the better point guards of his time. I think it's a different time, though. And then Ben Wallace, for what he did defensively, I think it's a yes. Just some of this stuff, it should be easier than what the Hall of Fame for basketball makes it. Like, some guys are clear-cut Hall of Fame worthy players, and some guys just get in because the Hall of Fame for basketball is a lot easier to get into.
Yeah, so that's actually what I was going to say, is maybe it's too easy in a sense in the NBA because they're pretty lenient, it seems, comparatively to football and baseball. Where there's huge backlogs on Hall of Fame type talent that haven't been inducted yet. Whereas basketball, there's guys that are still getting inducted from previous generations.
Right.
But it seems like we got a lot of people in. So maybe this is a good discussion to break it off, or to kind of segue into here. Maybe it would help if we thought of the Hall of Fame not as just yes or no, but if yes, what tier are you in the Hall of Fame? Because I think there's a clear difference even between like a Ben Wallace or a Michael Cooper if he gets in, and even a Chris Webber, right? Or Chris Webber / Tim Hardaway, and then a Kobe, Tim Duncan, and Kevin Garnett. Maybe what I'd call these is there's the impactful career tier, the best of your generation type tier, and then the greatest of all time tier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, because and then this is the one troublesome thing with the Basketball Hall of Fame is a lot of guys, when we say impactful careers now, there's so many guys that have impactful, to us, foreign careers.
Yeah.
Arvydas Sabonis, like we didn't find out about him till he was old and almost washed when he had a legendary career overseas.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many guys like that they get in because they had impactful careers to the game of basketball, not necessarily impactful careers to the NBA.
That is true.
And so that's kind of the thing is, if we're just keeping it basketball, then impactful careers could go for college, international, NBA. But like you said, best of your generation, yeah, you got some guys like, Darren Williams I mentioned him in the last pod. Is he an all-time great? No, I wouldn't put him in that class. He didn't have the longevity that Chris Paul had, but in his time, his peak, 8-year, 9-year window, top 4 point guard in the league for sure. You can't deny him.
So he'd be one of those best of generation types.
I would think he's a best of generation kind of guy. Go ahead.
No, I think that's the way to look at it. I mean, even looking at this class, I mean, like, for instance, I already said it, but like Bryant, Garnett, Duncan, those are among the greatest players of their possessions of all time.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, they should be, if you say their name, you don't have to think. Like, you should have to ponder, hands down, Hall of Fame.
Right. But then you get to certain guys that have both made it in the past, whether they were, and Michael Cooper's an example that might be is a finalist this year, but like guys from the past, like that were on the 60s Celtics, but they were role players on the 60s Celtics, but they won 8 or 9 championships, right? Do they get in? Like the Casey Jones of the world. Those are impactful players, I suppose, if that's the tier they're going to get in on. Or even like some of these players that have the international careers.
Like Draymond. Like, let's say the Warriors win one more ring before they all retire.
Well, let's say they don't. Does Draymond get in right now?
Right. Let's say they don't. Yeah. He's got Defensive Player of the Year. He's got all defensive teams.
He might have been on an All-NBA team or two, but yeah.
One All-Star appearance, one All-NBA team.
Yeah.
But is he really a Hall of Famer or just one of those guys who was great to have on your team and helped you win?
Yeah.
And then there's guys like, let's say, LaMarcus Aldridge, who's almost towards the end of his career. Mm-hmm. And we're looking at Chris Bosh. We're looking at Chris Webber. Same kind of career there, didn't do a lot of winning, but was one of the best at his position. And LaMarcus, I mean, he's been in the league for a while. He had a crowded Western Division that he competed in for a lot of years with Tim Duncan and Dirk and a lot of these guys that were, all-time great. So it's all in the tiers to me, how you want to label some of these guys. And
it's about these things, right? So like Joe Johnson had who knows how many All-Star games by the end of his career.
Joe Johnson was overrated, underrated, and overrated in like a 5-year span.
And maybe even historically he's now underrated because you realize how good he is when he's still balling out like the big three and stuff.
Sir.
Right? But so to somebody like that, should they be in the Hall of Fame one? And then, but if they are, I mean, I think we know what category somebody like that's in. They're a best of generation guy. You could argue, I suppose. But I think the more bothersome tier for me, like even if you're going to let those guys in, which is more like the Hall of Very Good, so to speak, is the impactful career people that whether they're international or they're getting in partially for their college career or whatever it might be. Those ones I think are more bothersome because then you can think of guys that were better in the league at the time, but because of situation, team they were on, injuries, whatever.
Or maybe a guy played 1 year in college because he was so good and went to the NBA and was better than this dude ever was in the NBA. But because this guy went to college, played 4 years, scored all these points, he gets in the Hall of Fame over a guy who's actually just better at basketball than he is,
It's tough.
I'm just going to say this. I like the tier idea. I do.
Yeah.
I respect it because I think it gives, like you said, Ben, the greatest of all time their due. But I might have to play a little devil's advocate here, because it's the Hall of Fame. It's not the Hall of you played on a good team or the Hall of you had a good stretch of 3 to 4 years. And that's where I kind of think, okay, you have guys like Bill Russell, the player Bill Russell. You have like the top tier guys in there, and then you're bringing in somebody like a Michael Cooper who probably, I don't know, I'm throwing out a number here, 80% of basketball fans probably might not even heard of. And so that's where
depending on your age.
Depending on your age, yes. But that's where I think, I like just the Hall of Fame, and you just get to the point where you're just sending in the greatest players of all time, like the Duncan.
No, I mean,
that
would be great.
That's what I want.
We're at this point in real world where they never did that. So we're at where we are with with the Hall of Fame for basketball.
And what is it? Now, quote me if I'm wrong here. What the NFL only allows like 4 guys in a year or something like that, or what is it? It's something.
It's pretty limited, right?
Is there Major League Baseball
I don't remember the exact
I think
number.
it's like
Yeah.
4 players. I think you're
Yeah.
allowed to do like a coach or somebody like that. I think
Yeah.
only 4 players.
And then there's all these like after so long you can't get reconsidered again until you're
Right.
part of like an older group.
Just
So
makes it
yeah,
a little
there's
bit
a lot of
harder to
things
get
that make
in.
it harder to get in the football and baseball Hall of Fames. And now also something that's interesting, like I mean, this is called the Pro Basketball Hall of Fame, so it's really not, I guess, limited in that sense to the NBA. That's why they have WNBA players, women's players, international players, as well as coaches that make it. But it is interesting because when you think of Hall of Fame, they should be guys that you, as if you're a serious basketball fan, know who they are and what they're about just by hearing their name. And maybe it's been a little bit too lenient when there's guys that get in that you wouldn't say were even top whatever on their team when they play.
Right. My final shot on this is let's see Webb in. Quit being weird about the college stuff. Yeah, he won't admit to taking stuff. Who cares? Let that man in and stop being weird towards him. Let him get
Well,
it.
and C-Webb, like he was so good when he played.
So good.
He was unbelievable power forward, and that was a stretch where it was actually harder to get into an all-star game.
And he made all those all-star games.
He made 5, but if he would have played in
that
Eastern
window,
Conference,
he made so many of those.
Right. I was going to suggest he could have made so many more if he wasn't behind Dirk and Duncan and Garnett and all these guys at the same time. Rasheed Wallace, like there's just so many power forwards that are all in the West at the same time. They were elite.
Like, let him in, man.
It's a tough one.
Well, give us your thoughts below. Let us know what you think, who you agree, who you disagree with. Let us know who you think is going to get in, who should be in, who shouldn't be in. Hey, this is the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. Stay tuned. We got a great show, rest of the show coming up. Hi, this is Mitch Shreve with the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for all the latest updates on all of our postings and content. You can also email us at thegiveandgo3@gmail.com to ask us any questions or give us suggestions on what you'd like to hear about all things basketball. Thanks for tuning in.